Happy New Year to you all. Happy New Year, Charlie.
Happy New Year.
How's your Christmas?
Joyous. We're back. We're back, baby.
I was actually really looking forward to coming back, actually, because sort of sometimes too much time off is not necessarily a good thing, is it?
We've got a job to do. We've got a world to change. There's not a minute to lose.
Yeah, that's right. So the purpose of this video is just to give you our thoughts on the year ahead, so 2021, innovations on the Made platform, what we're planning to do internally with our business, what the strategy is, and then ideas on how we can all back Britain, because we launched this campaign called Back in Britain some time ago, and probably for different reasons than what we're doing it at the moment. So the cause of backing Britain, I don't think, has ever been more important. And a lot of pressures internally, but predominantly externally. So you've got obviously the pandemic, and then you also have the separatist movement in Scotland. Who knows, maybe other parts of the UK. And I think this is probably as big a threat as anything else. We are stronger as a united kingdom, and that's one of the things that we will be discussing as part of our battle plan, because we actually have one or two ideas on how we can actually support this and strengthen the union. So it's a bit bold, but we'll talk about that later. So if we kick off with the project which is coming up next, which is Made Futures. We've talked about it before. It's on our social media platforms, but we probably haven't given you a demo of what it looks like behind the scenes. So we're effectively going to democratize the job application process so that companies can advertise for free on the Made platform. And at the moment, it's a publishing platform. You can publish news content, that sort of thing, message members. We've done a virtual exhibition. And the recruitment space is something that we've never been particularly keen on, and we wouldn't really want to get involved in the actual nitty-gritty of recruitment by any means, but we do think it's a massive problem. So there's still 5.5 million people on furlough. There's 1 million unemployed or there and thereabouts. And we are going to come to a crunch time, sort of some time after spring, where these people are either brought back from furlough or they're joining the unemployed ranks. So the challenge is huge. It can't all be bottlenecked in the hands of recruitment agencies, because it's too big a number to solve that way. And at the same time, manufacturing companies, they are recruiting. So we did a survey with Made Futures, and something like 70% of members plan to recruit in 2021, which is extraordinary, really, but not entirely unsurprising, because there was this massive skills shortage anyway in manufacturing. And now we have this huge opportunity to redress that balance, to actually be at the front of the queue and not the back, as I think you said before, Charlie.
Yeah, I think both from an education perspective and society, it seems that the manufacturers have lamented getting the guys and girls who have been maybe at the lower end of the academic achieving spectrum and getting into a sort of manual labour role. But I think the manufacturing jobs of the future are going to require skilled individuals, both young and old. And I think sector's got a perception issue historically, but does that get worsened during the pandemic in terms of job losses? So I think our goal is to try and make manufacturing firms more accessible and give them access to technology that makes them more accessible. So I'm particularly excited about the launch of Made Futures and the skills exhibition that's going to be formulating part of its launch in March, because as you say, there's a huge number of people, I think, waiting to join the unemployed ranks in this country. And I think if we can put some successful manufacturing firms in front of them, even if those firms aren't necessarily hiring that particular week, there's a massive responsibility that I think we've all got in the sector to try and raise the bar and showcase what a wonderful career opportunity lies in this sector.
Yeah, totally agree. So I just want to quickly show you the Made Futures website so far that we've built. So some of the discussion points, just to recap, is going to be Made Futures, which we're going to spend 5 minutes just discussing now. The plan for the year ahead, so summer drinks, which would be our next sort of social calendar, and how we can perhaps achieve that. The virtual breakfast and continuing that, platform enhancements, and just recapping on the publication update, because we used to have the Express and Star publisher, Made Mag, and we're now going to shift that to an internal process. And then this sort of idea of backing Britain, which is this suite of domains which we have quietly been acquiring, buying at auctions and privately across the UK, and how we can use that to back Britain. And then sort of finally, what we're doing as a business, on a micro level. So we are moving office at the end of this month. We've taken on a knowledge transfer partnership graduate from Birmingham City University, and we're looking to do more social events. So perhaps I'll just start off with the Made Futures. I'm going to just do a quick screen share. Can you see that, Charlie?
Yep.
So this is the Made platform. So if you imagine your microsite will work exactly as it normally does, except it will have a new tab called Careers, and from that from your microsite now, you will be able to add jobs to your microsite. It'll appear live on your microsite. It'll appear on the Made platform. It'll be tweeted by our social media team. But then every job that's posted gets added to this central jobs board called Made Futures. So if you think of gravity as a force where the heavier object attracts smaller objects, we're using the weight of every member microsite towards this Made Futures platform, which will generate traffic, cross-pollinate traffic. So every company has a careers page on their website. That's pretty much the standard. And unless you're one of the big companies like Jaguar Land Rover, Airbus, or one of the very big companies, nobody's really looking on that page unless it's somebody in your own company. But the idea is that we would basically aggregate 500 member microsites careers page onto a central hub. So it's better for the job applicant, and obviously there's more traffic for the company. And that's the thought process behind Made Futures. It's called democratization because effectively it disrupts the process and gives every member equal status. So if you could be a big company or a small company, and you're still likely to get the same level of traffic as if you were a Jaguar Land Rover or an Airbus. There's no discrimination as such. Every company gets an equal weighting on this Made Futures platform. So I'm really excited about how that could work, how that could help people back into work. We had a sort of regular team meeting this morning where we discussed after this exhibition, everybody who creates a job on the platform, we would do a little case study on, or a little micro blog, sort of welcome that person to the company. And we've targeted ourselves at creating 1,000 new jobs. I really think that's easily achievable. So with 500 members, we've already got 100 members who've said that they're going to advertise jobs on the launch of the virtual exhibition. Some people are advertising, more than 10 jobs. So 1,000 is realistic. A few hundred, I think, is probably would be the worst case scenario. So this is going to make an impact. We were all really excited and looking forward to working on it as well, because you only work on a project and you can see that it's making a really big difference to the community. That's what this is. So it's something different. We've never done this before, but it probably will be our best work. And backing this up, we're producing this sort of prospectus. Well, I'm doing it a disservice by calling it prospectus. It's 150 pages thick, bespoke product that will go to all of the delegates, the students, the graduates, and the people who are looking for jobs. The companies will have some as well. So it's a bit like a UCAS book, but for industry. So there'll be stories on what it's like to work at that company, a day in the life of different roles in the business. And it's really, an opportunity for manufacturing companies to show how far they've come and, where we are now. And I'll just read out a few of the events that we plan to kick off with. So when we launch this campaign, we're going to be organising, I think it's 10 virtual events. So we've got opportunities for older people seeking work, student employability, the future of work, which could be really targeted at robotics, IoT, digital masterclass on digital competencies. And then we're going to do a series of Meet Britain's Makers plus virtual speed job interviews. And we're going to zone it between areas. So there'll be, I think we've said that we're going to put one for South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, and then Hull and the Humber areas. And we're going to do the East Midlands, Black Country, Birmingham, and different zones. So it sort of makes sense for people who are looking for jobs to be within probably about 30 miles of where they live. So that's that's the main futures projects, and yeah, the next so the big major event, I guess, would be the summer drinks. We normally do those in May, June time. I think with the pandemic, that was a real tricky one, because we were really looking forward to an event we had organised in October, wasn't it, Charlie? When we booked the pub, we got a Michelin star chef in, and then it was cancelled at the last minute.
Yeah, it's put a lot of physical events into question. I think my hope is that with the vaccination program and the return of better weather in the summer, that we seem to see a real drop off of this. I'm hoping we'd have shifted COVID by the end of the spring. Obviously, that might be a bit optimistic given what we're seeing in the media at the moment about the current vaccination approach, which I don't think is going to work. But I'm confident that a summer event or early autumn event would be achievable. I think it brings together the fact that we're all a little bit sick now of the online realm. It's served its purpose. It's proved the productivity gains. I think companies are looking forward to getting back and reaching people on a personal level. And with it, whether you're in manufacturing or finance or education or whatever, I think relationships are driven face to face, and people do business with people. So I think our goal this year is to revisit the social platform, the social calendar, and really revamp that when safe to do so. I think we'll be one of the first networks back to doing that in a obviously safe and responsible way.
I did have an idea on the summer drinks on how we could accelerate that, because it was disappointing to cancel it last year. There is a company that sells and provides private testing, the rapid testing. It takes 15 minutes to get you results, and companies can buy them. And I was thinking maybe we could actually do that for our summer drinks. A bit laborious, but potentially we could test everybody, and you that wouldn't be 100% safe, but it'd be as safe as you could get it. And I think, do people want to sit in their houses for another year? That's the question.
No, I don't know about you, but I mean, I certainly felt for breaking up for Christmas, especially like myself, like yourself, Jason, and many other people in manufacturing space and running businesses haven't taken a whole lot of leave last year. There wasn't a lot to do. So when you're looking at breaking up and it's been quite a tiring year, it definitely felt like coming back in January would be coming back to a brand new start. Had this really utopian vision of what that was going to look like. And it may just be a little bit slower starting than perhaps we all hoped it would be. But I think that's going back to the masterclasses we delivered back in the spring, in March and April, when we went into lockdown. It was interesting to see what companies were able to glean from how others are operating, and those who are thinking about returning to work were asking what's everybody else doing. And I think this is the power of the network and the community, is to showcase and share. It could be best practice, it could just be intel, it could be just confidence. I think confidence is a big part of that in terms of how we're going to approach this. I think if I had one request, it's for all firms to look at what they can do. One of the founding tranches, pillars of Made in Group, when we first started the network, was a pledge to try and help companies look at what they were doing internally and externally, at the good things they were doing, and just give it to us to be an amplifier. So I think that would be very positive. Well, I think whether or not whatever we say about the vaccination process and the safety in numbers thing, manufacturing companies have been given the responsibility by government to create a safe working environment for their employees, and I think by and large have been pretty successful. I think was irresponsibility comes in if you look in the media at what's happened with Premier League footballers hosting farcical Christmas and New Year's Eve parties. But if you look at by and large how the sporting calendar has been able to return, they've achieved that through on-site testing, into venues and teams and so on, forming bubbles, etc. So it's definitely doable. But I think the main thing we need to do is drive confidence. Not flying in the face of irresponsibility. But
I think to get the confidence back, though, we need to get strategic. So I bought my son this for Christmas. Skyline chest, made in Britain, and you 3D prints the parts. So these are the sort of the types of pieces that come with the chess set. Can you see that? It's sort of white, isn't it? There's the gherkin. And yeah, I just wanted to teach him some sort of basic principles of sort of strategy, thinking a few moves ahead. And my granddad taught me how to play chess when I was I don't know, probably 7 or 8, something like that, and played it at school. And you're surprised how many people, how useful a skill that actually is. Just thinking, several moves in front instead of just what's in your face. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't really sort of consider what's happening around them. So I don't think it's healthy to watch the news every day, but I think it's important to be plugged in so that you've got a sort of an overview of what's going on. So it would be Brexit, international trade, or things that will affect your business. So diversification is is an important one, as we've seen with some of the members who've gone direct to consumer, which is a new trend in manufacturing, where manufacturing companies actually making their own end products, and we've seen some success with several of our members who are doing that. And just different ways that you can actually mitigate against certain risks. You can't eliminate them, but you can certainly mitigate against them. And we as a business, we've had the sort of challenge that that we've got this brand made in the Midlands, made in Yorkshire, back in Britain, and they are brands that are extremely relevant at the moment. And how can we get that into the public consciousness to actually help people? So we were looking at this sort of suite of domains, and people probably don't know this because we sort of collect them in the background. But we actually own some really prestigious domains. Really good one that we acquired probably over 12 months ago is Made in Wales. So we have madeinwales.com. Well, that's a country. We negotiated it. It was on auction, and we negotiated it offline. And it adds to the suite of iconic brands that we already have. So we've got madeinlondon.com. These are actually, expensive pieces of real estate, but they have a value, but we're not using them. And we thought, well, how can we use these domains to back Britain? We certainly don't have the time to launch all of these individual domains or networks. They're really time consuming to actually deliver and do a proper job of. And we were talking about Scotland, and Scotland has become a little bit disenfranchised, a bit disconnected. They probably feel a little bit unloved by the UK. And as a result of that, they've got this sort of nationalistic, nationalism, I don't know what you would call it. I mean, I liken the SNP to the BNP. I think they're very similar. But this form of nationalism, which is really, ultimately it is destructive, and it will be destructive because all of those types of sentiments always are. Nothing really good is going to come from that type of way of thinking. And I think instead of maybe just saying, well, we need to break up, we need to row our own boats, maybe start to think, well, what are the grievances? Because that's really what this is about. What are the grievances? What is it you feel that the UK is not doing? What is it you feel that Scotland is not getting? What would you want? What things would you want to change? And I think until we have those conversations, and I'm not sure that Nicola Sturgeon is the person to have that conversation with, because I don't think she does necessarily represent every view in Scotland. There's a lot of people that have a completely different view to what she has, and breaking through that, so that very similar to how businesses overwhelmingly wanted to stay in the European Union. Businesses need a voice, and this Made in Scotland platform, if we was to donate it to perhaps an entrepreneur in Scotland, or a business network, or even a chamber of commerce who has a set of values that is not separatist, but is actually trying to make things better. So a lot of companies out there that don't necessarily want to be an independent country of 6 million people, but want to be part of something bigger. And this anti-English sentiment, let's call it what it is. It's a form of racism. It can't be helpful. And I think if we look at our own sort of DNA and makeup, I don't know if you've done one of those ancestry tests, but I did one of our ancestry tests, and majority is from England, but there is a percentage, 20-odd%, which is Scottish, and that will be true of most people. Most people will have a sort of, in the UK, a different diverse makeup, and it's not entirely one nation. I think until we start seeing each other as perhaps, the things that we've got in common, we're always going to have these sort of conflicts. And do we really want a Scottish independence, a referendum, a campaign, all of that faff, just off the back of a Brexit and a national pandemic? Isn't it a bit selfish for a political party to go down that route. What are your thoughts on that, Charles? Because I know you had some opinions before. Obviously, we try not to get too political. We want to be solution-based. But what's your view on this?
I mean, I come from a very Celtic family. I've got probably a third of me is from Ireland, a third from Wales, third from I guess England. And what the hell is England, really? It's like an invaded bastard nation of pretty much every marauding European state up until probably 500-600 years ago. I don't know. But I'm not sure. I was thinking about this earlier, whether it's what I'm used to and therefore I'm comfortable with it. But it just seems when you're sharing borders and you've got a common language and a lot of history, that it seems to make sense that the union is as stronger together. And I think, I don't know, it feels like I don't have a very particularly positive view of Nicola Sturgeon. I feel she's kind of up there with the sensationalist leaders, maybe like Trump, that get elected with a very sort of emotive message. And I don't think you get the same sort of share of voice if you were a particularly unionist Scottish national who kind of said, well, actually, we're better off together. And if you look at how the GDP pans out in terms of what we make, we have a massive role to play in terms of anti-English sentiment. Historically, there's a good cause for that, I suppose. But my only frustration I've seen at the moment, without criticising the current government, and I heard this from the Welsh minister, that the current administration is not very collaborative, and the previous administration definitely wasn't a fan of Theresa May. But I think she was hosting weekly catch-ups with the devolved governments on strategy, economics, social stuff. And I think with COVID, it would have been even more important. But from what I gather from the Welsh minister, you get, his calls and letters aren't responded to and the meetings aren't held. It's very much, England is driving its own agenda as well. I think we're being probably a little bit selfish in that respect. Personally, I think did a little bit of reading into it. I think there's 5,500 manufacturing firms in Wales, employing 150,000 people, and about 8,000 manufacturing firms in Scotland. So we're equivalent to a smaller manufacturing base than the Midlands, or definitely smaller manufacturing base than Yorkshire. I think there are 30,000 manufacturing firms in the Midlands, for instance. So how we treat them as an economic trading partner, it's seen to be something that's probably smaller than the Northwest and smaller than definitely Yorkshire. So in terms of the economic importance, but Wales is very, very kind to its manufacturing firms. I mean, for the 12 years we've been running the Made-in Group, the Welsh government have been very proactive in getting investment into Wales. If you look at the development of the Airbus site at Broughton and the Airbus aerospace community around that, and I think Aston Martin moving into the former RAF station St Athan and the investment that's gone into there. There's a gigafactory being built. There's lots of positivity going on, and the government is very much open for business. And this is the point that perhaps the UK government can look at some of that in terms of how successful we've been able to be in attracting that investment. But at the moment, as it currently stands, I don't profess to be in a position to alter any of this. I'd say we need to embrace our Celtic partners. In terms of how, when we call backing Britain, I see backing Britain as backing the British Isles. How do we do that as a collective? And I think it's easier to do as a collective than it is individually.
100%. I mean, if you used to say, if you sort of transpose some of the issues we've got in the UK onto a bigger country such as America, and you used to say, okay, let's just say there's 52 states? And you used to say that let's divide each of those states into its own individual country. They would, as a country, they would obviously not benefit from that. But the only beneficiaries of that would be, the new superpower, which would obviously be China, the new number one nation, which would be China, followed by Russia. So you can see how the breakup of these countries doesn't actually benefit the countries. These are grievances which, I don't know Nicola Sturgeon, I don't know what her past is, but I would guess that something has happened maybe at some point in her life to sort of maybe cause these type of grievances that maybe not entirely is political. And I think what I would say to politicians is what we don't need as a country is we don't need more politicians, we need less politicians. So me and Charlie were talking earlier about what they do in the EU, which is obviously got Brussels and they have Strasbourg, mainly driven by the French who wanted to have their sort of their part in Parliament. But there isn't one Parliament in the EU. These two parliaments where they sort of switch between the two areas, and maybe we could do that in the UK. Do we need to have it just in Westminster? Could we have it in Westminster for 9 months, 1 month in Scotland, 1 month in Wales, and so on, so that we actually get these people more connected to the people? And if we do keep the parliaments, which I really don't think is a good idea, but if we did keep the parliaments, that these sort of nationalised parliaments, maybe they just focus on the issues that are relevant to that area, not necessarily national politics. Because what you have, just for reference, my dad was a councillor for many years, just for local council. He was deputy leader in the end, but the council issues were very different to the national issue. So they would talk about things like, I don't know, local community issues, fixing potholes on the road, and things that people in the local community cared about. They wasn't necessarily talking about international defence budgets and that type of thing, because it wasn't relevant to their local budget. They were discussing how they could best use the budget that was given to that local council. And I think maybe these councillors or politicians, maybe they need to sign a pledge to understand what their remit is, so that they have a sort of form of direct democracy, but it doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't seek to undermine democracy and undermine the collective people who live in the country, because the idea of sort of a politician for me is to serve the people that they're representing, not to do what they're doing at the moment, which is this sort of fragmentation, breaking up countries, and really agitating. So these people, they just argue amongst each other, and it's really frustrating from a general public perspective, because ordinarily I would say that the biggest determining factor in whether sort of your company or you are successful isn't politicians or external forces. It's yourself, how you act and how you respond to things. But this is the only time I can remember where these external forces are having a negative impact on businesses and obviously the people in those countries.
I think it's fashionable to be seen to be disruptive. I think if you look at Europe, I've always seen for the European Parliament, especially from the Made in Group sort of trade mission that we did to European Parliament about, was it 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
The sentiment from all of the members that went was that it looks like it seems to be full of a bunch of people who don't seem to want to make it work, because everybody's there with their own self-interest. And I see that with the devolved administrations. I see that at local government level as well. If you look at Farage, who came out with his thing of you laughed at me 25 years ago and you're not laughing at me now. And he's effectively driven an agenda.
You're right about that, though.
Yeah, he's effectively driven an agenda, regardless of which way you voted, because it could be a coin toss. But then now he's started. Did I see rightly that he started an anti-lockdown political party? And you're thinking, this is a guy who, I don't know, maybe he has these views, but he seems to get the sentiment of a large group of people, rightly or wrongly, educated or uneducated, and go, I think we should campaign for the opposite of what's happening at the moment, because there's enough people who will follow that. I don't know if it's an ego thing. I don't know if it's a thing of just being wanting to be referred to and discussed. But as a result,
I actually think, whether it be a politician or whatever, people sort of have these sort of grievances on a national stage, not necessarily because they've got a grievance against a country, but they're because it almost acts as a metaphor for their own personal circumstances. So I was interested in Farage. I've met him a few times, and I read an interesting article about his sort of his father. So his father actually, it's quite a sad story, but he attempted suicide. I think it was the age, was it 29, 30, something like that. And I thought, because the reason I researched this, his parenting, was because I thought, well, what drives him to be as angry and emotive as he is? And I thought, well, who is the father really? The father is the ultimate authority figure. And guess what age he was when he set up UKIP?
Same age his father died at.
I think he died, but he attempted suicide. And I think there's no way that those two things are not connected. And I think as a society, we have to sort of use our collective intelligence and not necessarily, we've got to look at who we're following, and we need to see, well, where are they actually leading us? And if they're leading us somewhere that's not necessarily in our own interest, we need to have some sort of critical thinking, and maybe just look at these people a little bit more carefully before we sort of, step into the unknown. So that would be my sort of message. And just to conclude on that sort of national debate, we have madeinwales.com. We're about to acquire Made in Scotland, and we certainly don't have the resources to launch these ourselves, but we would be willing to partner with somebody who believes in what we believe. So if you're interested in backing Britain, not necessarily taking a side on political view, so you can be Labour, you can be Conservative, you can have your own personal preference in that respect, but just the idea and the concept that you want to back Britain, support British industry and the United Kingdom, then we will give you this for free as a part of a joint venture or some other collaborative way of working. But we want to see these things evolve. It probably needs to be done at a local level, if I'm honest, but we would support you. So that's something that it's not part of our business plan, but it's certainly something which I think could help at the moment. If we could be more united, maybe connect these platforms together so that, there's a sense of community, but people see themselves as something bigger than not just simply, in this sort of parochial, microcosm where you're not necessarily, you're pitching yourself again. We're sort of having these internal wars when we should be actually, battling as one, and we should be battling against this pandemic. That should be our priority.
I'll tell you why it's important. I think if I had one message to take from this stream would be to just repurpose how you think about manufacturing in Great Britain as generally. I'll just give you a couple of numbers, just why I think this is important. 5,500 manufacturing companies in Wales employing 150,000 people. If I told you tomorrow that we're going to take a trade mission to South Carolina, which is a place of interest to me, or Michigan, Detroit, places like that, and asked which would appeal better or greater in terms of the manufacturing opportunity, there's actually only 11,000 manufacturing firms in the state of Michigan in an area with 250,000 square kilometers. So if you think about it, it's twice as many manufacturers in an area 10 times as large and on almost the other side of the world. And then you've got in Scotland, 8,000 manufacturing companies employing 150,000 people in a territory of just 79,000 square kilometers. So, we see other parts of the world and other emerging markets is more fashionable and more exciting, and I think we forget the value and the size of the prize so close to home. I think it's a case of making it. How do you make it fashionable? I think giving these firms an identity, giving them a platform and a voice. And if you look at the manufacturing, strongholds in North America in terms of their manufacturing community size, actually they're on comparable terms with Wales and Scotland. I just don't think we think of it that way. And there's certainly diversification within the aerospace in South Wales, for automotive and steel industry, and obviously oil and gas up in Scotland. So there's plenty for manufacturers to get their teeth into. I just think it's repositioning in our heads how we think about it, and re-embracing those links and the commonality of language and the ability for access. It seems an absolute no-brainer to me. So if we can help firms do that through Backing Britain, or organizations giving these regions greater profile and identity through a manufacturing voice, I'd say we'd definitely back that.
Well, I mean, business is different to nationalism, isn't it? Business is about doing business, getting business done, and perhaps businesses have slightly different goals to the general public, and people like your sort of socialist type leaders, they are able to tap into a sort of as politics normally do, they blame each other, don't they? So, well, the reason you're not doing what you should be doing is because it's this person's fault, but and they do that because that's the way to get votes, and that's why I suggest: do we need less politicians? Do we need to collapse some of these parliaments and actually just rotate what we've already got, because it clearly is not working? And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. When something doesn't work like this, and the people are the real losers from this. So how can we do our bit? And I think businesses can certainly probably lead on a lot of this. But I think a made in Scotland that backs Britain, I just think would be just an amazing contribution towards the uniting of the UK instead of the fragmentation and the attacks between I'll call it cultural grievances, because that's really what it is. And I think we need to examine very carefully who we're following them and where they're leading us. And that would be my tip in terms of the battle plan for 2021. All these things will fit into this, because our business really moves depending on how public sentiment and business sentiment is. So back in Britain evolved very differently to how we first imagined as a result of the pandemic and as a result of Brexit. We've sort of moved in a different direction, and that's what you need to do as a business: be quite agile, be prepared to shift your business plans depending on what happens in the market, and the quicker you can adapt, the better.
I agree, absolutely. I think the private sector, the manufacturing community, has shown great leadership that I think the governments could take a lead from.
If you look at we did this manufacturing hero section, and we identified so many companies that were helping in ventilator challenges, face masks. You give them a challenge and bang, it's done. And if we could just get that into the public sector, we'd have this vaccine under control. If you gave this to the private sector, you'd have the population vaccinated by the end of the month. That's the difference. We're talking about bottlenecking at the NHS and the hospitals and what have you, but you've got the resources, army medics. Why not use boots to pharmacy? There's lots of different ways that you could implement this from a logistical point of view. And I think one thing that bureaucracy is good at not making mistakes, but it's very, very bad in terms of speed. And I think when you sort of need a balance between the two, don't you?
Yeah, I look at envy the success of the Canadian government and the expertise behind it in terms of actually having people with experience in these roles. You'd think that would be a prerequisite. I don't know, if I could make those changes, I'd say that the people in office need to have relevant experience in their field. So if you need to be the general or former chief of air staff to be able to be in charge of our to be a defence minister, you need to be a doctor or medical professional to be in charge of healthcare. And I just think we've got these career politicians with no experience, certainly no senior leadership roles in the private sector, going into positions that have no experience. It's just a moving carousel of seats and faces. And I don't know, but I think we've always been quite disruptive and apolitical. I felt very strongly when we first started Made in the Midlands in terms of removing an anti-manufacturing government, as I saw it in Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, just seeing them bankrupt the nation. And I've been quite supportive, I think, of some of the steps that the coalition government made in terms of manufacturing. But it feels like we've gone back to square one, and this talk of people talking about how we're going to survive. And I don't want to survive, I want to thrive. I think the private sector has definitely got the tools and scope to do that. And I think they just need to be brave and back Britain.
I don't know if you've seen, I think you haven't. You've seen it on Netflix, World War II in colour. I think you was the one who referred me to it.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's on Netflix, if anybody's got some time to spare. I really think that everybody should watch it, if I'm honest. I just think it should be mandatory that everybody needs to watch that. And if you sort of look at history and how it repeats itself, back in World War II sort of days, and you could argue that the pandemic is very similar to a world war, not necessarily fighting a foreign enemy, but we are fighting a virus, aren't we? And when Churchill stepped forward, there was actually very, very poor leadership before Churchill, Neville Chamberlain, and people needed something to rally around. And I think how it was described is that the British were seen to have a bit of a sleepy disposition, and so the talent was there, the abilities were there, and if you could only motivate the British, then it would be a powerful force. And I think that's what Churchill was able to do. People were able to rally around his message and a cause. And of course, that was the defining moment of World War II, Churchill stepping forward. And yeah, what do we do in the absence of that type of leadership? I think we can still rally around an ideology of British values, what Britain has stood for in the past and what Britain continues to stand for, which is freedom, democracy, and making the world a better place. And we're doing that with the Oxford vaccine. That's a vaccination for the world. And these nationalists, they don't speak for everybody, they speak for the percentage of the population. And I think we need to push back on the ideology and actually just challenge that instead of just saying that that is right. Maybe that is not right. And we as companies, individuals, we need to be writing to our MPs, making it clear, and actually just presenting people with better solutions, better views of how things can be. So, there's lots of companies out there, they've got branches in Scotland, they've got branches in England, they've got branches in Wales. We're not these separate individual nations, and we shouldn't allow people to make us believe that we are.
Yep, totally agree. Then again, I'm someone who, having lived in Central Europe, has enjoyed the European community and very much lament being separate from it. But as long as we can still do business with these people and trade with them and visit these countries easy enough, then great. But for me personally, I mean, one of my great pleasures of my adult life is driving across Europe free of borders and free of checks. And it wasn't until I got to Romania and was taken out of the car pretty much at gunpoint at a border patrol. And you remember thinking, it's nice when everybody's kind of working and playing together nicely. But get the impression a lot of people who've been voting for this have probably come from the baby boom generation, remembering how Britain used to be in its pomp, and are not necessarily voting for the interests of the future. I see that from the devolved state as well. Interesting to see. I think one of the great challenges the government's got and our society is kind of activating its youth politically and getting people to take an interest. Otherwise, as far as I can see, we'll just get more of the same.
I mean, like I say, I think we need less politicians. So whether we have less politicians or maybe more independent type candidates who are just wanting to do some sort of civic good, and perhaps they don't belong to a party. Maybe we ban political party memberships. Who knows? But maybe a creative solution is out there that will get us past this sort of these parties that just argue between each other. It's like a pendulum of hate at the moment, isn't it? Where one party blames the other party, and as general public and as businesses, we ordinarily don't get this. Ordinarily does not affect us, and I think the fact that this is affecting us is I think crossing a red line, and that's where we need to sort of strongly push back on this and innovate. We need to rally around the cause, and I think that cause is quite obvious. Back in Britain doesn't need to belong to any one person. Back in Britain can belong to everybody, and everybody can have their own version of how they think that should be. But we don't necessarily need to rally around one individual politician. I think that's it'd be nice, but it's not going to happen. So this Back in Britain cause, I think, could be much bigger than just simply a logo that you put on your website.
I agree. I think with all great things, it doesn't have to be political. That's the beauty of this group. It doesn't require funding from government, doesn't require committee. There's no committee-led decision making. It gets the sentiment of the manufacturing community, and it goes ahead and creates something. And I think that's our strength, isn't it? The less politics involved, the better.
100%. Well, business will thrive anyway. I think I've used this analogy before. There's 4 million plus companies out there. They're all individual ships. It reminds me of the Dunkirk spirit. We're all there sailing away. We can all do our bit. We can all do our bit to back Britain. And you might think, well, what difference does it make if I'm just a small company with 20 employees or 30 employees? But if everybody doing a little bit, I just think would make a tremendous difference. So, I mean, I'm starting 2021 with a battle plan. This is a war. This is, we're going to succeed. We're going to do our bit to sort of ensure that people can get back into the workplace, that we can connect manufacturing companies. We're going to find a way to do these summer drinks and Christmas drinks. And get people back to connected, even if we have to sit there with cotton buds in members' noses doing these 15-minute tests. We're going to find a way to do it.
Onward and upward.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for listening, and look forward to working with everybody next year. And obviously, we look forward to be able to help create these jobs within Made Futures and to bring people together. That's what the purpose of this community is about. It's about connecting people. And yeah, we've had some tremendous support from people over the last 12 months, and hopefully that will continue.
Absolutely. We're here for you all. Good luck. Make it happen.
Cheers. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.